My name is Madeline Harper, 32 years old, and I just walked away from $15 million. For 3 generations, Harper and Sons Auction House has been the gold standard in New York's art world. My expertise in rare collections transformed our family business from respectable to remarkable. Meanwhile, my brother Alexander has a business degree but couldn't tell a Monet from a Manet. I never thought my own parents would choose bloodline over talent. Before I tell you how I built an empire just to watch it crumble, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of reclaiming my worth. I grew up surrounded by beautiful things. Our family home in Connecticut housed museum-worthy pieces that rotated as they went to auction. While other kids had picture books, I had catalogs. Instead of bedtime stories, my father would tell me about brushstrokes and provenance. By age 8, I could spot a reproduction from across the room. It wasn't just a party trick, it was the foundation of my future. My mother Eleanor would take me to estate sales on weekends. "Look with your eyes first, then your hands, then your heart," she'd whisper. I learned to feel the weight of silver, identify hallmarks on porcelain, and recognize the distinct smell of old canvas. These weren't just objects to me, they were stories waiting to be told. When I was 16, I caught a Degas forgery that had fooled 2 senior appraisers. The piece had the right materials, the right aging, even the right signature, but the dancer's positioning was slightly off. Degas understood anatomy. I explained to my skeptical father. The weight distribution here is impossible. 3 weeks and several tests later, my observation was confirmed. That was the day my father stopped introducing me as my daughter and started saying, "Our secret weapon." I earned my art history degree from Columbia, graduating summa cum laude with a thesis on authentication methodologies that was published in 3 major journals. While my classmates headed to museums or galleries, I knew exactly where I belonged. After back-to-back internships at Christie's and Sotheby's to understand our competition, I returned to Harper and Sons ready to revolutionize. The auction house occupied a 5-story brownstone on the Upper East Side. The first floor displayed our current offerings, the second housed our offices, the third contained our authentication labs, the fourth our archives, and the fifth the space for private viewings. The building smelled of lemon polish and old money. When I walked through those doors with my new business cards, Madeline Harper, Senior Authenticator, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Over the next decade, I transformed our family business. I modernized our catalog system, transitioning from printed booklets to an interactive digital platform. I developed proprietary authentication technology that combined traditional techniques with spectroscopic analysis. I created a client database that tracked not just purchases but interests, connecting collectors with pieces they didn't even know they wanted yet. Our sales increased by 37% within 3 years. My brother Alexander, Alex to the family, was 3 years younger and infinitely less interested in the business. He attended Wharton, joined a fraternity, and returned with a business degree and a talent for spreadsheets, but zero passion for what we actually sold. He could talk profit margins all day, but couldn't tell you why a client might prefer expressionism over impressionism. "It's just stuff, Maddie," he'd say, using the nickname I'd repeatedly asked him to drop professionally. Expensive stuff, but still just stuff. Our parents, Harold and Eleanor Harper, were proud of both their children, but in different ways. They praised my expertise, but celebrated Alex's business acumen. When he proposed cost-cutting measures that would have alienated our top clients, my parents called it innovative thinking. When I secured exclusive rights to auction the Richardson collection, beating out Christie's and earning us a $2 million commission, it was simply good work, dear. Our family dinners were exercises in diplomacy. My father would sit at the head of the table, my mother to his right, Alex to his left, and me across from him. The seating arrangement wasn't subtle. Harper and Sons had been founded by my grandfather Theodore Harper in 1948, passed to my father Harold in 1982, and was always intended to stay in the family line. The fact that the family line had produced a daughter with unmatched talent and a son with minimal interest seemed irrelevant to tradition. I focused on building relationships with collectors. Lawrence Whitmore became my most valued client. a notoriously private billionaire who had amassed one of the finest private collections of 20th century American art. Whitmore refused to work with anyone but me, even declining meetings with my father. "You understand the soul of these pieces," he told me once, "not just their price tags." Whitmore's loyalty wasn't just flattering, it was financially significant. His purchases and consignments represented nearly 15% of our annual revenue. He'd call me directly on my cell phone, sometimes at odd hours when inspiration struck. "Madeline, I need something that speaks to isolation but with undertones of hope," he might say, and I'd know exactly what to look for. My father recognized Whitmore's importance, but seemed uncomfortable with his preference for me. "Client relationships are crucial," he'd remind me, "but remember they're loyal to Harper and Sons, not to individuals." I'd nod politely, while knowing the opposite was true. In the art world, trust is everything, and trust is personal. By my 10th year at the auction house, I had effectively become its operational head. I led team meetings, curated major auctions, and handled our most significant clients. My father still held the title of CEO and managing director, but increasingly deferred to my judgment on everything except financial decisions, which he discussed primarily with Alex despite my brother's limited involvement in day-to-day operations. I didn't mind the arrangement. Titles meant less to me than actual influence. Besides, I was playing the long game. At 67, my father had begun mentioning retirement. I expected, and everyone else assumed, that I would formally take the reins when he stepped down. I dedicated my life to Harper and Sons. It wasn't just a family business. It was my identity, my passion, and my future. Little did I know that future was about to shatter like a mishandled Ming vase. Spring in New York brings a certain energy to the art world. The major auction houses plan their most significant sales for May and November, creating a biannual frenzy that sets the market tone. This particular spring, I had orchestrated what promised to be our most profitable season ever. After 3 years of gentle persuasion, I had convinced the Westmoreland family to auction their collection, a stunning assembly of American modernist works acquired by steel magnate Robert Westmoreland throughout the 1950s and 60s. The collection included 3 Edward Hoppers, a Georgia O'Keeffe, 2 Jackson Pollocks, and a rare early Mark Rothko, among other treasures. Conservative estimates valued the collection at $15 million, but I knew we could push beyond 20 with the right marketing and buyer cultivation. "This is extraordinary work, Madeline," my father said when I showed him the signed consignment agreement. "How did you convince them to choose us over Sotheby's?" "I didn't just offer them a sale," I explained. "I offered them a narrative. These pieces tell the story of American optimism after World War II. They deserve to be presented as a cultural document, not just as individual lots." My father nodded, impressed but not surprised. This was what I did: find the story behind the art and use it to connect emotionally with both sellers and buyers. For weeks, I worked 14-hour days preparing for the Westmoreland auction. I personally oversaw the photography for the catalog, wrote detailed provenance reports for each piece, and developed marketing materials that emphasized the collection's historical significance. I arranged private viewings for select collectors, including Lawrence Whitmore, who expressed interest in the Rothko and one of the Hoppers. "Your eye for curation is unmatched," Whitmore told me after viewing the collection. "You've arranged these pieces to speak to each other across time." I coordinated with museums for authentication confirmation, negotiated with insurance companies for appropriate coverage, and trained our staff on the specific talking points for each piece. This wasn't just another auction. It was potentially transformative for Harper and Sons. Success would elevate us from a respected family business to a true competitor for the auction world's top tier. Around this time, rumors began circulating about an upcoming leadership change. My father had mentioned at our last board meeting that new blood was needed as the company moved forward. Several colleagues congratulated me prematurely, assuming the announcement was a formality. Even our chief financial officer pulled me aside to discuss budget priorities for when you take over. I tried to remain professionally modest about the prospect, but privately, I allowed myself to dream. As managing director, I would implement the innovations I'd been advocating for years. Expanded digital presence, satellite locations in emerging markets, specialized departments for contemporary art and design. I envision Harper and Sons becoming not just an auction house, but a cultural institution, hosting lectures, publishing research, perhaps even establishing a foundation to support emerging artists. During this period, my mother invited me to lunch at her favorite restaurant, an old-world French place where the waiters still wore white gloves. "Your father has been thinking a lot about the future," she said between sips of Chablis. "He's very proud of what you've accomplished." "And Alex?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Your brother has his strengths," she replied diplomatically. "Different from yours, but valuable." I nodded, having heard variations of this sentiment throughout my life. My expertise, my passion, my dedication were always acknowledged. But somehow, Alex's different strengths were treated as equally important to a business centered on art and antiquities. Still, I remained optimistic. The signals seemed clear. After years of proving myself, I was about to receive formal recognition of what was already reality, that I was the true leader of Harper and Sons. The week before the announcement, I had lunch with Lawrence Whitmore at his Upper West Side penthouse. As we discussed his interest in the Westmoreland pieces, he casually mentioned hearing about my imminent promotion. "It's about time," he said, cutting into a salmon. "When you officially take over, I have several pieces I've been waiting to bring to market. I've been holding them back because, frankly, I only trust you to handle them properly." I felt a flush of pride and excitement. Whitmore's collection was extraordinary, and the pieces he considered his reserves were rumored to include works that hadn't been on the market for generations. "Nothing's official yet," I cautioned, though I couldn't suppress a smile. "In this business, few things are more predictable than merit rising to the top," he replied. "Your parents would be fools to choose otherwise." I spent the weekend finalizing details for the Westmoreland auction and mentally drafting my acceptance speech for the managing director position. I allowed myself to imagine the moment: my father announcing his partial retirement and my appointment, the applause from colleagues, perhaps champagne in the main gallery. After 15 years of dedication, I was ready for recognition. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning, but the formal announcement would come at a dinner the following evening at Le Bernardin, my father's favorite restaurant. I selected a conservative but elegant black dress, had my hair professionally styled, and even splurged on new Manolo Blahniks for the occasion. This was to be my coronation. The moment when Madeleine Harper officially became the face and future of Harper and Sons. How spectacularly wrong I was. Le Bernardin glowed with understated luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm light over crisp white tablecloths. Our party occupied a private dining room at the back of the restaurant. My parents, Alex, myself, and the 6 board members who oversaw Harper and Sons operations. Everyone was dressed impeccably, the men in tailored suits, the women in cocktail attire. The air smelled of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. I noticed my mother seemed tense, avoiding direct eye contact with me as she sipped her martini. My father, by contrast, was unusually jovial, clapping board members on the back and laughing too loudly at their jokes. Alex sat between our parents, looking simultaneously smug and nervous. After the appetizers were cleared, my father stood, champagne flute in hand. The table fell silent. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, working toward for over a decade. Harper and Sons stands at a crossroads, my father began. For 3 generations, we've built a reputation for integrity and expertise in the art world. But markets change. Technology advances. To remain competitive, we must adapt. He paused, taking a slow sip of champagne. I straightened in my chair, ready to accept the responsibility he was about to bestow. Madeleine has done extraordinary work with our authentication processes and client relationships, he continued. I felt a flush of pride, quickly followed by unease at his use of past tense. Her expertise has been invaluable.
Has been.
Not is.
Has been.
But moving forward, Harper and Sons needs more than expertise in art. We need strategic vision, financial acumen, and bold leadership for the digital age. The room began to tilt slightly. I gripped my water glass, suddenly understanding where this was going. It is therefore with great pride that I announce our new managing director, my father said, turning toward my brother. Alexander Harper will lead Harper & Sons into its next chapter, effective immediately. The room erupted in applause. I sat frozen, my face a careful mask, while inside my world collapsed. Alex stood, shaking hands with board members, accepting congratulations with practiced humility. I'm honored to carry on the family legacy, he said, emphasizing the word family with a quick glance in my direction. I don't remember the main course being served. I must have eaten something, must have engaged in conversation, but those minutes exist in a fog of shock and betrayal. I recall noticing the board members' expressions, some genuinely pleased, others darting uncomfortable glances my way, aware of the absurdity of this decision. Howard Pierce, our longest-serving board member and a family friend, leaned toward me during dessert. "This must be difficult," he murmured. "For what it's worth, I think they've made a mistake." I nodded slightly, not trusting myself to speak. Across the table, Alex was already outlining his vision to an attentive Bernard Saunders, the youngest board member. "We need to streamline operations," I heard him say. "Focus on high-margin segments, possibly divest from some of the more specialized categories." Specialized categories. The rare books and manuscripts division I had personally developed. The emerging artist program I had championed. All potentially on the chopping block because they didn't fit neatly into my brother's business school metrics. After coffee and cordials, as the evening mercifully wound down, my father pulled me aside in the restaurant's elegant foyer. His expression was a mixture of authority and awkward conciliation. "I know this isn't what you expected, Madeline," he said, his voice low. "No," I replied, surprised by how calm I sounded. "It isn't. Alex has the business acumen we need right now. The market is changing." "The market has always been changing," I interrupted. "I've navigated those changes successfully for years." My father sighed. "This isn't a reflection on your contributions. You're essential to Harper & Sons. But leadership requires a different skill set." "A Y chromosome, apparently," I said before I could stop myself. His expression hardened. "That's unfair. This has nothing to do with gender." "Doesn't it? It's always been Harper & Sons, not Harper & Daughters. That's the name my father chose. And heaven forbid we update tradition," I said, feeling tears threatening and hating myself for it. Even when tradition makes no sense. My father placed a hand on my shoulder. "Alex will need your support, Madeline. This transition will be difficult for him." And there it was, the final insult. Not only had I been passed over for the position I had earned, but now I was expected to support and nurture the very person who had taken it from me. "I'll see you at the office tomorrow," I said, pulling away from his touch. Outside, the spring air felt cool against my flushed skin. I declined the family car and ordered an Uber instead, needing distance from everything Harper. As we drove through Manhattan's glittering streets, I stared out the window and considered my options. I could stay, swallow my pride, and continue doing the work I loved under my brother's management. I could confront my parents more forcefully, demand recognition. Or I could leave. The thought of leaving Harper & Sons felt like contemplating amputation. The auction house wasn't just my workplace. It was my identity. I had given it my youth, my talent, my passion. Could I really walk away? My mother called as I was entering my apartment. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to hear whatever justification she might offer. Her message was brief. "Please don't make any hasty decisions, Madeline. Family is more important than business." But they had made the business more important than family when they dismissed my contributions as insufficient. When they decided that Alex's degree was more valuable than my proven track record. When they chose the son over the more qualified daughter because of some outdated notion of legacy. I poured myself a generous glass of Macallan 18, a gift from Lawrence Whitmore after I secured a rare Basquiat for his collection, and stood by my window overlooking Central Park. The city lights blurred as I finally allowed myself to cry, grieving not just for the position I'd lost, but for the illusion that merit and dedication would ultimately be rewarded. By the time I finished my scotch, my tears had dried, and my resolve had crystallized. If Harper and Sons could so easily dismiss my value, perhaps it was time I showed them exactly what that value was worth. Morning arrived with cruel brightness. I dressed with particular care: a charcoal Armani suit, Louboutin heels, minimal jewelry, battle armor. The office would know about Alex's appointment. News traveled fast in our small world. I needed to appear unfazed, professional, dignified in defeat. Walking through Harper and Sons' ornate entrance felt different. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old books now carried notes of betrayal. Staff members offered sympathetic smiles or awkwardly avoided eye contact. My assistant Miranda handed me my schedule with a tentative, "Are you okay?" "Perfectly fine," I replied with practiced composure. "Just another Monday." At 10 a.m., Alex called an all-staff meeting in the main gallery. He stood before a sergeant portrait we were featuring in the upcoming American Masters auction, looking uncomfortable in a suit that probably cost more than some of our employees made in a month. "As you may have heard, I'm stepping into the role of managing director," he announced, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged space. "I'm excited to lead Harper and Sons into a new era of growth and innovation." I stood at the back, arms crossed, noting how he unconsciously mimicked our father's speech patterns and gestures. Several colleagues glanced my way, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. "While we honor our traditions," Alex continued, "we must also embrace change. Over the coming weeks, I'll be reviewing all departments to identify efficiencies and opportunities." Translation: cuts were coming. I watched our authentication team exchange worried glances. They knew their department was expensive to maintain. "I'll be counting on each of you to support this transition," Alex finished, his gaze finally finding me at the back of the room. "Especially those with long-standing client relationships." The implication was clear. He expected me to transfer my client relationships I had cultivated over years, to his stewardship, as if trust could be handed over like a business card. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find Alex waiting, seated in my chair. He swiveled slightly, looking at my shelves of reference books and client files. "Nice view," he said, nodding toward the window that overlooked Madison Avenue. "I might take this office once we reorganize." I leaned against the doorframe. "Was there something you needed, Alex?" He stood, buttoning his jacket in a gesture so reminiscent of our father it was almost comical. "Just wanted to touch base about the Westmoreland auction. Dad thinks I should take point on it." The Westmoreland family specifically chose Harper and Sons because of my approach to their collection, I replied evenly. "Their contract names me as lead curator." Alex frowned. "Contracts can be amended. As managing director?" "You risk losing the entire collection if you push this," I interrupted. "The Westmorelands aren't just selling art. They're entrusting us with their family legacy. They need to feel confident in our handling." "And they can't feel confident with me?" His voice had an edge now. "Do you know which hopper in their collection Patricia Westmoreland posed for? Or why the Rothko was kept in Robert Westmoreland's private study rather than the main gallery?" Alex's silence was answer enough. "These details matter, Alex. They're not just anecdotes. They're relationship currency. The Westmorelands chose us because I know their collection story." "Fine," he conceded with visible irritation. "Handle the Westmoreland auction. But I want daily briefings, and I'll be attending all client meetings moving forward." After he left, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The authentication database I'd developed over the past 5 years appeared on screen. Thousands of entries documenting provenance details, material analyses, and market histories. My proprietary system had streamlined our authentication process, reducing verification time by nearly 60% while improving accuracy. This database belonged to Harper and Sons on paper, but in reality, it was mine, my methodology, my research, my insights coded into every algorithm. The same was true for my client files, which contained personal notes about collectors' preferences, family dynamics, and private motivations that influenced their buying decisions. I was contemplating this when my mother called, asking me to meet for lunch. We sat at her usual table at La Grenouille, surrounded by Manhattan socialites and business executives. "You must understand your father's position," she said after ordering her usual Niçoise salad. "Harper and Sons has always passed from father to son. Even when the son has minimal interest or expertise?" I asked, pushing my untouched foie gras aside. "Alex has other qualities," she insisted. "He understands finances, strategic planning." "So does our CFO," I countered. "Should she be managing director?" My mother sighed, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "Madeline, please. You're making this difficult. Your role at Harper and Sons is secure. Nothing changes except the title." "Everything changes with the title, Mother. Authority, direction, vision, these flow from leadership." "Then support your brother's leadership," she said, reaching for my hand. "Help him succeed. That's what family does." I withdrew my hand. Did anyone consider helping me succeed? Or was I always just keeping the seat warm until Alex was ready? Her silence told me everything. Back at the office, I found an email from Alex outlining his modernization plan, which included replacing my authentication system with a third-party service that offered comparable results at reduced costs. The service he referenced was one I had evaluated 2 years earlier and rejected for its inferior methodology and frequent errors. This wasn't just about my title anymore, it was about dismantling my contributions piece by piece. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Lawrence Whitmore. "I hear congratulations are in order," he said, his tone ironic. "Not for you, unfortunately." "News travels fast," I replied. "In our circles, always," Whitmore said. "I'm calling to confirm our meeting next week about the Wyeth Collection." Still on. The Wyeth Collection, 5 Andrew Wyeth Works Whitmore, was considering consigning to our fall auction. Potentially $2 million in commissions. "Actually," I said, making a split-second decision, "you might want to speak with our new managing director about that. Family tradition and all." "I don't do business with people I don't know, Madeline," Whitmore replied, his voice cooling. "You handle my affairs at Harper and Sons, or no one does." After we hung up, I sat in silence, thinking about loyalty, to family, to clients, to oneself. Where did my true obligations lie? That evening, I stayed late at the office, waiting until everyone had left. Alone in the quiet building, I walked through the galleries where paintings worth millions hung in perfect lighting. I touched the mahogany banister my grandfather had installed in 1953. I stood in the authentication lab where I had made discoveries that changed art history in small but significant ways. Then I returned to my office and began systematically backing up my personal research notes and client insights to an external drive. I didn't take company property. Anything developed on Harper and Sons' time technically belonged to the auction house. But my personal methodologies, my private client notes, my unique insights, these were mine. After transferring the files, I deleted them from the company servers, leaving only the basic frameworks. The systems would still function, but without the depth and nuance that made them exceptional. Next, I drafted a formal resignation letter. Professional, unemotional, effective immediately. I cited philosophical differences regarding company direction as my reason for leaving. Finally, I packed my personal items, photographs, reference books I'd purchased myself, a small Giacometti sketch Lawrence Whitmore had given me as a thank you gift. I left my company phone, credit cards, and ID badge on the desk. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway and looked back at the office that had been my second home for over a decade. "Goodbye, Harper and Sons," I whispered, then turned and walked away from everything I had built, leaving only silence behind. The security guard looked surprised to see me arriving at 7 a.m., resignation letter in hand. "Early start, Ms. Harper?" "Something like that, Joe," I replied, forcing a smile. I headed straight to Human Resources, where Diane Kendrick was already at her desk reviewing personnel files. Her eyes widened when I handed her my letter. "This is effective immediately?" she asked, scanning the contents. Madeline, is this because of Alex's appointment? My reasons are outlined in the letter, I said, maintaining my professional tone. Please ensure my final compensation includes my outstanding vacation days and quarterly bonus, as per my contract. Diane stood, her expression distressed. Have you spoken with your father about this? Or Alex? This seems very sudden. It's not sudden to me, I replied. Please make sure the board receives a copy of my resignation today. By 8 a.m., word had spread. My assistant Miranda burst into tears when I told her. What will happen to the Westmoreland auction? She asked between sobs. That's for the managing director to determine, I said, handing her a letter of recommendation I'd prepared. You're extraordinary at your job, Miranda. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. At 9:30, Alex stormed into my half-empty office, face flushed with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? Resigning, I replied calmly, placing my grandfather's fountain pen in my purse, the last personal item remaining. You can't just leave in the middle of the Westmoreland preparations. We have obligations, contracts. Those contracts name Harper and Sons as the responsible party, I reminded him. And you're the managing director of Harper and Sons now. Congratulations again. Alex ran a hand through his hair, his confident facade crumbling slightly. This is childish, Maddie. You're throwing a tantrum because you didn't get your way. I'm making a business decision, I corrected him. My expertise is clearly not valued here, so I'm taking it elsewhere.
Where?
Christie's? Sotheby's? He laughed without humor. Dad will sue you for breach of contract if you join a competitor. My non-compete prevents me from joining another auction house for 6 months, I acknowledged. But it doesn't prevent me from independent consulting. Alex's eyes narrowed. You're planning to poach our clients. I'm planning to continue working with people who value my expertise, I corrected him. If those happen to be former Harper and Sons clients, that's hardly my fault. My phone buzzed with a call from my father. I declined it and continued packing my bag. Dad's going to be furious, Alex said, sounding suddenly younger, more like the brother I grew up with than the businessman he was pretending to be. I imagine he will be, I agreed. But then, he made his choice. Now I'm making mine. As I walked toward the elevator, several colleagues approached to say goodbye. Some seemed genuinely distressed, others merely curious about the family drama unfolding before them. I maintained my composure, thanking them for their good wishes and promising to stay in touch. My father called 3 more times before I reached the lobby. When I finally answered, his voice was tight with controlled anger. Return to the office immediately, Madeline. We need to discuss this like adults. There's nothing to discuss, I replied, stepping out onto Madison Avenue. You made a business decision. So did I. You're abandoning your family, he accused.
No, Dad.
My family abandoned me when they decided my decade of dedication wasn't worth recognizing. I ended the call and turned off my phone, hailing a taxi to take me home. For the first time in years, I had no meetings scheduled, no clients to call, no auctions to prepare. The freedom felt both terrifying and exhilarating. At my apartment, I poured a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the city bustle below. My phone, now turned back on, buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, clients, and family. I ignored them all, needing time to process my new reality. Around noon, Lawrence Whitmore called. I hear congratulations are in order, he said when I answered. For my resignation? I asked, surprised. For your independence, he clarified. About time you stepped out from under the Harper shadow. We arranged to meet the following week to discuss potential opportunities, as he put it. After hanging up, I felt a flicker of hope amid the uncertainty. By evening, the messages from Harper and Sons had taken on a different tone. Miranda reported chaos in my absence. No one could locate key files for the Westmoreland auction. Client contacts were missing, and authentication protocols had inexplicably changed. Alex is absolutely losing it, she texted. He's threatening to fire the entire IT department if they can't recover your authentication database. I hadn't destroyed anything, merely removed my personal insights and methodologies. The basic systems remained functional, but without the nuanced understanding that made them exceptional. The next morning, 3 more calls came from my father, each increasingly conciliatory. "We can discuss a co-director position," his last voicemail offered. "There's room for compromise here." Too little, too late. Over the following days, I began setting up a small consulting office in my spare bedroom. I purchased new business cards, Madeline Harper, art authentication and acquisition consultant, and started building a website. 5 days after my departure, news broke that Sotheby's had approached the Westmoreland family about representing their collection. Patricia Westmoreland herself called me to explain. "We chose Harper & Sons because of you, Madeline," she said. "Without your involvement, we need to reconsider our options." I wished her well, maintaining my professional ethics by neither encouraging nor discouraging her decision. Internally, however, I felt a twinge of satisfaction. The Westmoreland auction would have represented Harper & Sons' largest commission of the year. By week's end, several key staff members had contacted me about potential positions once I established my own business. The head of authentication, 2 senior appraisers, and my assistant Miranda all expressed interest in joining my venture when the time came. Meanwhile, industry blogs began reporting turmoil at Harper & Sons. Art News published a piece titled, "Harper & Sons Faces Leadership Crisis as Star Authenticator Departs," featuring quotes from anonymous sources about questionable succession decisions and family dynamics trumping business sense. On Sunday evening, exactly 1 week after my resignation, my father appeared at my apartment unannounced. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the door. I let him in but offered no refreshments. He stood awkwardly in my living room, looking out of place among my modern furniture and contemporary art. "Lawrence Whitmore called this morning," he said finally. "He's withdrawing his collection from our fall auction. $3.8 million in potential commissions gone." I said nothing, waiting. "He specifically asked for you," my father continued. "Said he only works with people who understand his vision. Mr. Whitmore is very particular about his collection," I noted neutrally. My father turned to face me directly. "This isn't just about Whitmore. The Westmoreland auction is in jeopardy. 3 senior staff have submitted resignations. Clients are calling asking specifically for you." "And?" I prompted when he fell silent. "And we need you back," he admitted, the words seeming to physically pain him. "Harper & Sons needs you." I crossed my arms, feeling a strange calm. "I think you mean to say that Alex needs me." My father sighed heavily. "Alex is struggling with the transition." "Because he's unqualified for the position," I said bluntly. "Because he lacks your specific expertise," my father corrected. "Which is why you should be working together." "I offered to work with Alex for years," I reminded him. "He showed no interest in learning the aspects of the business I manage. Why would that change now?" My father ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking every day of his 67 years. "What do you want, Madeline? Co-directorship? A seat on the board? Name your terms." I considered his offer for a moment before responding with quiet certainty. "It's too late for terms, Dad. I'm building something of my own now." As my father turned to leave, defeated, I added, "If Alex has questions about the Whitmore collection, tell him to check the red folder in the client archives. And remind him that Mr. Whitmore prefers afternoon calls, never before noon." My father paused at the door. "Is that all?" I smiled slightly. "No, but it's all I'm offering. The rest he'll have to figure out himself. That's what managing directors do, isn't it?" After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down at my new home office desk. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "This isn't over, Madeline." I typed back a simple response. "You're right. It's just beginning." The call came at 6:42 a.m. exactly 1 week after my resignation. I was in the middle of my morning run through Central Park when my phone buzzed insistently. Seeing my father's name on the screen, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something, intuition or perhaps morbid curiosity, made me answer. "Madeline." My father's voice sounded strained, almost desperate. "We have a situation." Good morning to you too, Dad, I replied, slowing to a walk. Lawrence Whitmore just pulled his entire collection from our fall auction, he said, cutting straight to the point. 3.8 million in commissions gone. He's taking everything to Christie's. I found a bench and sat down, wiping sweat from my forehead. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate. My father's voice rose sharply. It's catastrophic. Whitmore isn't just any client. He's our anchor for the American Masters auction. Without his pieces, the entire event loses its draw. I'm aware of Mr. Whitmore's significance, I said calmly. I've only been cultivating his business for 7 years. He's asking for you specifically, my father continued, his tone shifting from angry to entreating. Says he won't work with anyone else, not even Christie's. He wants you to represent his collection, whatever that means. I watched a pair of joggers pass by, their breath creating small clouds in the cool morning air. Mr. Whitmore values relationships and expertise, I explained. He doesn't trust institutions. He trusts people. You need to fix this, Madeline. I don't work for Harper and Sons anymore, Dad. This isn't my problem to fix. A long pause followed. I could almost see my father pacing in his office, running a hand through his silver hair as he always did when frustrated. What do you want? He finally asked. A higher salary? That corner office you've been eyeing? Name it. It's not about compensation, I said, standing to continue my walk. It's about recognition and respect. Something money can't buy. For God's sake, Madeline. My father rarely raised his voice, but now it boomed through the phone. This isn't just about your pride. This is about our family legacy, the business your grandfather built from nothing. A legacy that apparently only matters when passed through male hands, I replied evenly. Another pause, longer this time. When my father spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost pleading. Come to the office. Let's discuss this face-to-face. Alex will be there. We can work something out. I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to enjoy the chaos my absence had created. But another part, the professional who still cared about the art, the clients, the institution itself, was curious to see just how bad things had gotten.
Fine, I conceded.
I'll be there at 11. Harper and Sons looked the same from the outside. The elegant brownstone facade, the discreet brass plaque by the door, the meticulously arranged display windows. But inside, the atmosphere had changed. The usual quiet efficiency had been replaced by a palpable tension. Staff members spoke in hushed tones, glancing up nervously as I passed. My father and Alex waited in the main conference room, surrounded by papers and open laptops. Alex looked disheveled, his normally immaculate appearance marred by a wrinkled shirt and dark circles under his eyes. My father stood when I entered, an awkward half-smile on his face. Madeline, thank you for coming. I took a seat across from them, placing my handbag carefully on the polished table. You mentioned a crisis. Alex pushed a folder toward me. Whitmore isn't the only one. The Westmorelands are threatening to pull their collection too. And 3 other major consignors are reconsidering their options. I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. Client emails, internal memos, preliminary auction estimates, all painting a picture of imminent disaster. The Westmoreland auction is in 3 weeks, my father said. Without your client notes and authentication protocols, we're struggling to proceed. My authentication protocols are still in the system, I pointed out. The basic framework remains intact. The framework, yes, Alex admitted, frustration evident in his voice. But all your specialized notes are gone. The contextual data, the comparative analyses, it's all missing. I shrugged slightly. Those were my personal research notes, not company property. Bullshit, Alex snapped. You deliberately sabotaged the database before leaving. I removed my intellectual property. I corrected him. Nothing more. My father intervened before Alex could respond. Regardless of who owns what, the fact remains that without your expertise, we're facing significant losses. The Westmoreland auction alone represents $15 million in potential sales. And Lawrence Whitmore's collection? I asked. 3.8 million in commissions, my father repeated. Possibly more with the right bidders. I nodded slowly. So, nearly 20 million in transactions at risk. All because you thought Alex was better qualified to lead the company. Alex flushed red. This isn't helping, Maddie. No, I agreed. It isn't. But neither was dismissing my decade of dedication in favor of your business degree and last name. My father sighed heavily. We made a mistake, Madeline. Is that what you want to hear? We undervalued your contributions. We took your expertise for granted. Yes, I said simply. You did. A tense silence filled the room. Through the window, I could see Madison Avenue bustling with morning traffic, the city continuing its relentless pace while our family drama unfolded in this quiet room. What would it take to bring you back? My father finally asked. Before I could answer, the conference room door opened and my mother entered. She wore her customary pearls and a navy suit, her expression a mixture of determination and distress. Madeline, she said, crossing to embrace me. I returned the hug stiffly. Thank you for coming. This is a business meeting, Mother, I said as she took a seat beside my father. Not a family reunion. Harper & Sons is both business and family, she replied. That's always been its strength. And its weakness, I countered. My mother looked pained, but didn't argue. Instead, she turned to my father. Has Lawrence called back? No, my father admitted. His assistant says he's not taking calls from Harper & Sons. He'll take my call, I said confidently. 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me with varying degrees of hope and suspicion. Will you help us then? My father asked. I leaned back in my chair, considering my position. The satisfaction of watching them struggle was undeniable, but so was my attachment to the clients and collections I'd cultivated over the years. I'm establishing my own consultancy, I said finally. Lawrence Whitmore has already expressed interest in my services, as have several other former Harper & Sons clients. You can't poach our clients, Alex protested. Your contract. My contract prevents me from working for a competing auction house for 6 months, I interrupted. It says nothing about independent consulting. My father looked grim. What are you suggesting, Madeline? A partnership, I replied. Not employment. Harper & Sons contracts me as an independent consultant for authentication and client relations. I maintain my separate business identity while providing services to the auction house. At what cost? Alex asked suspiciously. 20% commission on all transactions I facilitate, plus a monthly retainer for authentication services. 20%. Alex looked outraged. That's highway robbery. That's the market rate for saving 20 million in at-risk business, I countered. Take it or leave it. My father and Alex exchanged glances. Even my mother looked uncertain. We need to discuss this privately, my father said finally. Of course. I stood, gathering my belongings. Take all the time you need. Lawrence Whitmore is meeting with Christie's tomorrow morning, so you have until then to decide. As I reached the door, my father called after me. Madeline, did you ever consider that this might destroy Harper & Sons? The business your grandfather built. I turned back to face my family. Grandfather built Harper & Sons on expertise and integrity, not nepotism. Perhaps you should have considered that before making your decision. Outside, the spring air felt cleansing. I walked several blocks before calling Lawrence Whitmore from a quiet coffee shop on Lexington Avenue. How did it go? He asked by way of greeting. About as expected, I replied. They're desperate but still resistant to change. Whitmore chuckled. Typical Harold. Too proud to admit when he's wrong. They're considering my partnership proposal, I said, stirring my latte. But I'm not holding my breath. You shouldn't have to fight for what you've earned, Madeline, Whitmore said, his tone serious now. Remember, my offer stands regardless of what they decide. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. That evening, my parents appeared at my apartment door unannounced. My mother carried a casserole dish, her traditional peace offering, while my father clutched a folder of documents. We need to talk, he said as I reluctantly let them in. My mother busied herself in the kitchen while my father and I sat in the living room. He placed the folder on the coffee table between us. "We've considered your proposal," he began. "The terms are acceptable with some modifications." I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. 15% commission rather than 20, he continued. "And we want exclusivity. No consulting for competing auction houses while you're under contract with us." 18%, I countered. "And I'll agree to non-competition for specific clients I handle for Harper & Sons, but my business remains independent." My father hesitated, then nodded. "Acceptable. And what about Alex?" I asked. "Alex remains managing director," my father stated firmly. "Then my answer is no." My father's expression hardened. "This isn't negotiable, Madeline. The board has confirmed his appointment. Then confirm mine as co-director with equal authority," I insisted. "Or watch your clients walk away one by one." Before my father could respond, my mother returned from the kitchen. "Harold, for God's sake," she said, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Stop being so stubborn. We're about to lose everything because of your pride." My father looked startled by her intervention. In 35 years of marriage, my mother had rarely contradicted him publicly. "Eleanor," he began. "No," she interrupted. "I've supported your decisions for decades, including this one, and look where it's gotten us. Madeline deserves recognition for her contributions. If that means co-directorship, then so be it." A heavy silence fell over the room. My father looked between us, seemingly recognizing that he was outnumbered. "The board," he tried again. "The board will approve whatever you recommend," my mother said dismissively. "They always have." Finally, my father sighed in defeat. "Co-directors," he conceded. "Equal authority. But financial decisions require mutual agreement between you and Alex." I considered the offer. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I had expected. "I want it in writing," I said. "Formal contract, board approval, public announcement." "Fine," my father agreed. "We'll have the lawyers draft the agreement tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, my father paused at the door. "Will you call Whitmore tonight?" "His meeting with Christie's." "I'll handle it," I promised. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment, contemplating the unexpected turn of events. The victory felt hollow somehow, tainted by the knowledge that it came through coercion rather than merit. Would my grandfather have approved of my tactics? Would he have understood my frustration? These questions lingered as I dialed Lawrence Whitmore's number to deliver the news. The auction house that had dismissed me was now begging for my return. The brother, who had taken my rightful position, would now have to share it. The parents who had devalued my contributions now acknowledged their mistake. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt complicated. A mixture of vindication, resignation, and determination to prove, once and for all, that I deserved the Harper name just as much as any son. The board meeting that formalized my appointment as co-director was held on a rainy Tuesday morning. I arrived early, dressed in a custom navy Chanel suit, an investment in my new professional identity. The boardroom felt different now that I was entering as an equal rather than a subordinate. My father sat at the head of the table as always, but now Alex and I flanked him on either side, a visual representation of our new power structure. "The board has reviewed and unanimously approved the restructuring proposal," my father announced once all members were present. "Effective immediately, Harper & Sons will be led jointly by Alexander and Madeline Harper as co-directors, with myself remaining as chairman." Howard Pierce, our senior board member, smiled warmly in my direction. A long overdue recognition, if I may say so. The meeting proceeded with remarkable efficiency. My partnership agreement was approved, my authentication protocols were formally recognized as essential to operations, and my client relationships were acknowledged as key assets to the company. Throughout the proceedings, Alex remained unusually quiet, his expression unreadable. After the meeting adjourned, he approached me in the hallway. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "I suppose you got what you wanted." "This isn't about winning, Alex," I replied. "It's about recognition." "Is there a difference?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture reminiscent of our father. Look, I know I'm not the expert you are. I never claimed to be. But I do have skills that could benefit this company. I never said you didn't, I pointed out. I've always been open to collaboration. You're the one who kept dismissing my input. Alex looked uncomfortable. Dad always framed it as an either/or situation. His heir or. He trailed off, seemingly aware of how it sounded. His daughter? I finished for him. I didn't ask to be put in this position, Maddie. Neither did I replied. But here we are. The question is, what are we going to do about it? A moment of understanding passed between us, perhaps the first in our adult lives. We weren't just siblings or rivals. We were now business partners with a shared legacy to protect. The Westmoreland auction is in 2 weeks, Alex said finally. I could use your insight on the marketing approach. It wasn't quite an olive branch, but it was something. I'll review the materials this afternoon, I promised. My first official act as co-director was to call Lawrence Whitmore and personally assure him that his collection would receive the attention it deserved at Harper & Sons. He sounded pleased but not surprised by the news of my appointment. I told you they'd come around, he said. No one walks away from talent like yours, Madeline. Thank you for your confidence, I replied. And for your patience during the transition. Strategic pressure often yields the best results, Whitmore observed. I'm looking forward to our continued collaboration. The call ended with Whitmore confirming that his collection would remain with Harper & Sons for the fall auction, a $3.8 million commission secured with a single conversation. Over the following days, I worked to restore the authentication systems I had partially dismantled upon my departure. The process was methodical and gave me time to think about the future of Harper & Sons under shared leadership. While reinstating my client notes and research protocols, I also documented my processes more thoroughly, not to make myself replaceable, but to make the company stronger. A week after my appointment, I received an unexpected visit from my mother. She appeared at my office door carrying a small wooden box I recognized from my grandfather's study. I've been meaning to give you this, she said, placing the box on my desk. Your grandfather would have wanted you to have it. Inside was a collection of my grandfather's personal effects, his loupe, his fountain pen, and most significantly, his authenticator's stamp, which he had used to certify genuine pieces during the auction house's early years. He always said you had his eye, my mother continued, her voice soft with memory. Even as a child, you could spot quality and craftsmanship in ways Alex never could. I held the loupe up to the light, remembering how my grandfather had taught me to examine brushstrokes and canvas weave. Why didn't you say anything when Dad chose Alex over me? My mother sighed, smoothing her already immaculate skirt. I've spent 40 years supporting your father's decisions, Madeline. It becomes a habit. Some habits need breaking, I observed. Yes, she agreed, surprising me. They do. Which is why I told your father I would resign from the board if he didn't recognize your position. I looked up sharply. You threatened to resign? I did more than threaten, she replied with unexpected steel in her voice. I submitted my letter. Harold can be stubborn, but he's not stupid. He knows the Harper name carries weight because of both of us, not just him. I studied my mother with new eyes, wondering how many times over the years she had exerted influence behind the scenes, quietly shaping outcomes while allowing my father to believe decisions were his alone. Thank you, I said simply. She nodded, a slight smile touching her lips. Harper & Sons should really be Harper & Daughters too. Perhaps it's time for another change. The Westmoreland auction exceeded all expectations. Under our joint leadership, Alex handled the financial and operational aspects while I managed client relations and authentication. The Hopper painting sold for well above estimate. The O'Keefe set a new auction record, and the Rothko, the piece Patricia Westmoreland had been most reluctant to part with, found a home in Lawrence Whitmore's collection, bringing the relationship full circle. The success brought validation, but more importantly, it brought clarity. I realized that while I had fought for recognition within Harper & Sons, what I truly valued was the work itself, the art, the history, the stories behind each piece. The title had mattered less than the respect it represented. 2 months after the Westmoreland auction, I called a family meeting to discuss a new proposal. My parents and Alex gathered in my father's office, curiosity evident in their expressions. "I've been thinking about our company identity." I began, distributing folders containing my proposal. "Harper and Sons served us well for 3 generations, but it no longer reflects who we are." My father frowned slightly. "The name carries significant brand recognition, Madeline." "I'm not suggesting we abandon it entirely," I clarified. "Rather, that we evolve it to reflect our current leadership and future vision." I opened my laptop to display the new logo and branding I had commissioned: Harper Heritage Auctions. "This preserves our family name and legacy while removing the gendered limitation," I explained. "It also emphasizes our connection to history and tradition, values our clients appreciate." Alex studied the materials thoughtfully. "The modern typography works well with the traditional elements," he noted. "It's a good balance of old and new." My father remained silent, his eyes fixed on the proposal. I could almost see him weighing tradition against innovation, past against future. "Your grandfather named this company Harper and Sons because he expected his sons to carry it forward," he said finally. "But he only had me, and I only had you too." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "I think he would approve of this change. It honors where we came from while acknowledging where we are." The rebranding launch coincided with our spring auction season. The new signage was installed above our entrance, our catalogs and website redesigned to reflect our updated identity. At the inaugural event under our new name, I stood at the podium to welcome clients and collectors to Harper Heritage Auctions. For 75 years, our family has had the privilege of connecting exceptional art with discerning collectors. I began, looking out at the gathered crowd. While our name has evolved, our commitment to expertise, integrity, and personal service remains unchanged. From the front row, Lawrence Whitmore gave me an approving nod. Beside him sat Patricia Westmoreland, who had returned with several pieces from her late husband's private collection. Along the wall stood our senior staff members, many of whom had threatened to resign during the leadership crisis, but now looked proudly toward the future. "Art endures because it speaks to something timeless in the human experience," I continued. "At Harper Heritage, we understand that we're not just selling objects. We're preserving stories, connecting generations, and honoring creativity in all its forms." As the auction began, I took my seat beside Alex at the director's table. The first lot, a small Degas sketch similar to the one I had authenticated at 16, opened at twice its estimate and quickly climbed higher. "Not bad for a family business," Alex murmured as the bidding intensified. I smiled, watching as the gavel fell on a final bid well above our expectations. "Not bad at all." Later that evening, after the auction concluded and the crowds dispersed, I stood alone in our main gallery. The empty pedestals and bare walls would soon be filled with new treasures for our summer auction. The cycle would continue, as it had for 3 generations, but now with new energy and direction. My grandfather's loop hung from a silver chain around my neck, a reminder of where I came from and the legacy I was entrusted to carry forward. Not as a daughter obligated to prove her worth, but as a leader recognized for her expertise. The journey from betrayal to empowerment had been painful but necessary. In fighting for my place, I had not only secured my own position but potentially strengthened the company for generations to come. By challenging tradition, I had paradoxically honored my grandfather's true legacy, not the name he chose, but the values he instilled: excellence, integrity, and vision. As I turned out the lights and prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photograph of our new signage, Harper Heritage Auctions, illuminated against the night sky with a simple message beneath: "Your grandfather would be proud." "I know I am." The sender remained anonymous, but the sentiment resonated deeply. I had built something meaningful, lost it through no fault of my own, and then rebuilt it stronger than before. In the process, I had discovered that true worth comes not from titles or recognition, but from the quiet confidence of knowing your own value, even when others fail to see it. Sometimes, walking away is the most powerful step you can take toward creating the future you deserve. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from something you built to finally get the recognition you deserved? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for your worth. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest legacy you can leave is the courage to demand the respect you've earned.